Hey there, folks. Welcome to Quest Online. Now, I know that not having service in person, that stinks, but let's not let that dominate our day, our thinking, any of that, okay? So, what we should let dominate our thoughts, our minds, our time is three things: staying connected to each other, staying connected to the world, and staying connected to God. However, staying connected right now, it seems hard and kind of daunting while we're separate. But if you think about it, the day and age that we live in, we have phones that we can take everywhere. We have computers, we have iPads or tablets, we have emails and texts and social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these things. That staying connected should actually be easier these days than any time ever before. But we choose not to use these things, and so we make excuses about why we can't stay together and we can't stay connected. But we have all these things at our disposal. Even here at Quest, we have the online directory. So I have a challenge for you guys. So if you're a part of the directory, I want you to sign on today, tomorrow, sometime this week. Get on there and choose one person, any person in there, and connect with them. Send them a text, give them a call, shoot them an email, and just check in and see how they're doing. All right, it's easy, one person. If you're not in the directory, I challenge you to sign up for the directory so you can choose one person to contact, any person, just to tell them you're thinking of them, to see how they're doing, if they need something. Just think, if we each connected with one person, how many lives would be touched by that? So if we're gonna stay connected, let's make an effort to stay connected. Choose one person this week, just one. So now that you have your charge for today, to stay connected to each other, let's talk about how we can stay connected to the world.
Hello, Quest families. This is Karen Robertson from Quest Kids. I wanted to talk with you for a moment about Advent Conspiracy. And one of the projects on our list, the fourth project, is the feeding program for the children in Haiti.
Now, we're hoping to fund each project as we go to fully raise support for it before moving on to the next to make sure we can follow through and complete projects. Now, just because the feeding program is fourth, it doesn't mean it's least important. As Karen said, we think it's really important, and we wanted to help our students and our children in the Quest community to be able to give to other kids their age who have significant needs. So we're going to be giving to this project directly from Quest students and Quest kids.
If you are a parent at Quest and have children in the Quest Kids program, you may have already heard from your children about some of the things that we had talked about concerning this feeding program. I asked the children one day when we were still meeting together, and I said, so what do you do during the day if you're hungry and you're at home, and what do you do? Do you go to mom and say, Mom, can I have some goldfish crackers? Or Mom, can I have a yogurt or a Go-Gurt out of the fridge? And very often, moms and dads can give you something very easily, very quick, and there's an abundance in the pantry to be able to have snacks during the day, 3 meals a day for your kids. And I was explaining to the children that in Haiti, there are many children that only have 1 meal a day, and that is the one that's provided at the feeding center. And it's rice and beans. It's their only meal for the day. They can't go home and ask mom and dad for snacks. There's nothing in the pantry. And I think it really helped our children to think about the abundance that we have here in the United States, the difference between what we have here, the blessings that we have here, and what the children there experience in the families. I'm sure that it's hard on the families.
So if you have kids in Quest Kids or students, middle school, high school, in our youth group, you may have heard them come to you to ask, are there any chores I can come and do and pick up and get a little extra money from around the house in order to give to these projects? And we strongly encourage this. We'd love for our students to be able to participate and join in with this giving and to have the sense of accomplishment of working for something to be a blessing to others.
I wanted to give that opportunity to those of you in Quest that don't have kids in Quest Kids. The last part of Acts 2 talks about the Christian community, the church, selling their property, selling their things, and pooling all of their money so that they could contribute to the needs that were in the body. And so we have that opportunity. We have so much here in the States. We have that opportunity to be able to meet the needs of others. And that just happens to be that the feeding program is one of those for the children in Haiti. So I would encourage you to think about it, pray about it, see how the Lord directs you to give to Advent Conspiracy so that we can meet the needs of others in other parts of the world.
So if you want to help Quest kids or support Quest students in giving to the Advent Conspiracy projects, we would love that. That would be amazing. You could go to our website, questchurchstl.org, and go to the Advent Conspiracy section where there's a link for you to be able to give online to Advent Conspiracy. Or you can write a check to the church and list in the memo that this is for Advent Conspiracy feeding program and list Quest kids or Quest students.
God bless you, and I hope you have a blessed Christmas season. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen and Jonathan. Here's the rest of what we want you to know. Here's the skinny. While Christmas Eve service won't be in person this Thursday, that is a bummer, but we're working on something special. It'll be a little different, a little outside of the box, but sometimes life needs a little of the unexpected. Like Christmas so long ago when God Himself came here as a baby. December 27th will look a little different too. Instead of regular service, we're going to have an all-church Zoom call at 10 a.m. that morning. So be on the lookout for that link so you can join the group to reflect and catch up. We're hoping to be back to in-person services in January. If all goes as planned, January 3rd will be the first service back in the building. We'll also be starting a new series focused on reconciliation in relationships. Make love, not war, is a good reminder to love those around us and not be out looking for a fight. Let's work to make our relationships better instead of looking for reasons to be distanced. God created us to be in relationship with Him and with each other. This upcoming week will be a busy one, so let's take a moment to sit and reflect on the beauty of our Savior, the fact that He came to earth for us, and this is why we celebrate.
Good morning, friends. This is Luke from the worship team. This morning, as we come to worship and as we continue in this season of Christmas, it's good to take pause, to breathe and to rest and to be grateful. And in many ways, we've anticipated the joy and the hope and the feeling of togetherness this season might bring, and certainly we celebrate those things in many ways. But this Christmas season looks different than many that have come before it, and our expectations have certainly been challenged in a lot of ways. And yet, our worship is desired, our rejoicing is needed, and our hope is not lost. And I wonder if that is maybe the truest expression of how people felt as they waited for the Messiah, as they longed for a king that would come and to save them and to bring them hope. They had expectations of who He might be and what He might do. And having the Christ come as a baby in humble fashion maybe didn't live up to their expectations of the long-awaited king. But even in that time of adjustment and of shifting of expectations, they knew that what was promised had been fulfilled, that what was spoken by the prophets had come to life, that God in His deep love for them had sent the Savior. And in their response to that, to those expectations, and to the gift they had been given, they worshiped Him. So today, we get to share in the same anticipation, remembrance, and awe of what God has done for us, but we have even more than hope. We not only have a Savior in our midst, we have been saved for eternity through the redemptive work of Christ on the cross. So this season, as you adjust your expectations for what is to come, I want to encourage us to still rejoice in the coming of Christ, in the one who has ransomed us from captivity and given us life beyond what we could ask or imagine. Let's worship Him together.
Good morning, and welcome to Quest. We're glad you're here, and we're continuing our series this Christmas that we have called The Light is Here. And we intended to do this in person, but we've been stuck to do this online, but that's okay. You know what? We can still communicate and enjoy and worship together. So we're going to continue after last week. In fact, last week, Jonathan spoke out of John chapter 1, which is this incredibly beautiful chapter about the coming of Christ, kind of on a philosophical level, rather than just kind of the historical level that we see often like in Luke 2. But in John 1, these are the issues that Jonathan kind of identified. First of all, he said that the light that has come and is here, that the light brings life. And there's something incredible about that, right? To think that light brings life. And we see that clearly in nature, botany, and all those different things. Light brings life when it shines. Without light, things die. But the light brings life. Secondly, he said that the light brings truth. And that the light illuminates, reveals truth. There's something incredibly beautiful about that too. That it brings the truth. So that we don't have to live in the lie or live in the darkness, right? The third thing that he said was that the light brings the presence of God. So this is more of a philosophical, theological, esoteric approach to life, if you will, but that the light brings the presence of God. So somehow that life and truth adds up to the presence of God being with us. And then the fourth thing that he said is that the light brings the revelation of God, the revealing of God, the expression, exposing of who God is. That's what the light does. So if the light is here and it brings those things, that's awesome. Now, just for a second, let's think about this. Let's highlight the four things that the light brings: life, truth, the presence of God, and the revelation of God. So let's think about it for a moment. If we were to be rational, reasonable, thinking people, and we would understand that that's what the light brings, now wouldn't we say, count me in, sign me up? That is amazing. That is awesome. Life, truth, the presence of God, and the revelation of God. That would be so mind-boggling, so fantastic, that we would obviously jump into that pool in a New York second, right? But, and sometimes it's a big but, there's a huge problem. Look at John chapter 3, verse 19. It says this, and this is the judgment. This is the explanation. This is the evaluation, if you will. The light has come into the world, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. It reveals the dilemma of man. That there's this thing called light, and it's full of life and truth and the presence of God and the revelation of God. All the things that would be awesome in life. Yet we choose the darkness. That this is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, but people love the darkness rather than the light, and because of their works were evil. Now, we all have probably different levels of the amount of evil we've done in our lives. But the reality, it all comes from the same place. From a heart that likes the darkness rather than the light. Plato, the Greek philosopher, related to this whole dichotomy of light versus darkness, which seems to describe us. And he said this, we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy in life, you guys listen to this, this is so right, that the real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. And for some reason we choose darkness over the light. It's a huge problem. It describes, as we read the newspaper, as we watch the news, as we dig into what's going on around us, we see it not only out there around us, but even in us. It's amazing. Now, this whole theme of light versus darkness, it is one of the primary themes that runs throughout the Bible, describing the conflict mankind has both with God himself, but also with one another. But also this theme of light and darkness, it also shows the tenacious heart that God has for resolution to every aspect of those conflicts. So it reveals this giant collision, this giant car wreck, this train wreck that happens in life, but it also shows us that God has a tenacious heart for resolution, for resolving this, for dealing with this. Now, you guys, sometimes those conflicts can be really complicated. And we know that. We understand that. Even in our own lives, they're not easy and always very simple. But also, these conflicts are what God has called us to help resolve. He hasn't left us on the sidelines. He wants to resolve them, but he wants to use us in the process of resolving these conflicts. Now, to this morning, we're going to look at this passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, the first 10 verses. Before we get into it, I wanted to say here's the big idea. So if you miss all the rest of it, here's the big idea for this morning. It's this. You and I are just cracked pots. We may be crackpots, but we're also just cracked pots whom God is pleased to miraculously use in revealing to the world the majesty and the glory in the person of Christ, to reveal who he is, and he's done it in the person of Christ. And he wants to use you and I in that process. Okay? Now, let's get into the passage and see what it has to say. So let's go. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 1 to 10. Let's start in verse 1. It says, therefore. Now, obviously, therefore comes after a series of things. The first 3 chapters are talking about the ministry that God has called us all to. And he says, therefore, having this ministry, by the mercy of God. See, it is God's kindness, God's mercies towards us that we have this ministry. He's doing it. He's called us not because we deserved it, but because he called us. And it's by his mercy. And so he says, having this ministry, we do not lose heart. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this is very apropos for our day. We've been through a lot in the last year. The whole world has been. For Christians, it's been a very challenging time. And to really think, how do we relate to the pandemic, to the political chaos, to the civil uproar that's been going on? And I think there's been times where we've been really tempted to lose heart. But here he says, having this ministry by the mercy of God, we do not lose heart. To be strong of heart, to hang in there. Now, look at verse 2, and let's highlight this. I want to kind of make a big deal out of this. But verse 2 says, but we have renounced disgraceful, underhanded ways. You see, Paul understood that some people, even in Christian ministry, but people who are trying to influence others, have sometimes used disgraceful patterns, disgraceful tactics, if you will, or underhanded ways in order to accomplish what they're doing. And what Paul's saying here is, we're not going to do that. We're going to renounce disgraceful things. We're not going to use underhanded ways. It says we refuse to practice cunning or trickery, or we're not going to mess with God's word. You know, I'm grieved today that there are people in the ministry, whether it be from one extreme or one edge to the other, who actually practice trickery to accomplish what they want. Some of them clearly are tampering with God's word. They slice it and dice it, take out what they don't like, put in what they want, in order to make it more palatable to people, to tickle their ears. But it actually doesn't help people. Because God's word is God's word, and it's full of life. But they tamper with God's word, and Paul says, we're not going to do that. But by the open statement of the truth, we would commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. He says we're going to tell the truth. We're going to say what it is. Now, we don't have to do that in a mean fashion. Jesus says that he was full of grace and truth. Grace by itself is simply weak. But truth by itself is simply harsh. But you take grace and truth and put them together, as Jesus did all the time, it's going to give life. And here it says, but by the open statement of the truth, we would commend ourselves to everyone's conscience in the sight of God. Here's what I think the bottom line is. He's calling us to do life and ministry with the utmost of integrity. Let's be people who shoot straight. Let's be people who are honest and upfront. Let's do life and ministry with the utmost of integrity. That's what Paul is calling us to here. And then in verse 3 it says this, and even if our gospel is misunderstood, is veiled, it is veiled only for those who are perishing. Now, look at verse 4. And in fact, let's highlight verse 4. It says, in their case, the ones who are perishing who are veiled to the gospel. In their case, now listen to this. This is powerful. This is incredible stuff. In their case, the God of this world. Now, who's the God of this world? What it's referring to is Satan and his dominion. This is the only place in the scriptures where the word God is used in connection with Satan. But the God of this world, the one who has power in this world for now. It's not forever. But the God of this world, here's what happened. He has blinded the minds of unbelievers. So there's a participation that we all have in blinding ourselves. But there is someone who is blinding the minds of unbelievers. And look at this. In order to do this, and let's highlight this, to keep them from seeing. So he's blinded them to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ. That he has blinded them from seeing the beauty, the splendor of the gospel, the glory that is Christ himself. And then look at this, and let's underline this. Who is the image of God? Now this little phrase, who is the image, the word there, the Greek word is icon. It is the representation. When you think of God, Christ is the representation. He is the full expression. He is the visible expression of the invisible God. You want to know what God is like? All you have to do is look at Christ. He is the image of God. And what the God of this world is blinding people to understanding that. Because they think somehow that he's going to ruin life rather than give life. That he's going to tell them lies rather than give them truth. That he's going to give them the presence of something other than God himself. And that there's no revelation of God. And so they reject him. And they've been blinded to that. Wow, it's an amazing thought. In fact, Martin Luther King Jr. said this as he was thinking about things like this. He said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I think we live in a world where somehow we think that darkness is going to deal with the problems of our day. And that we don't really need the light. Somehow we're going to just increase it with darkness. Or that somehow hate will solve the issue of the hate in our world today. If you hate me, I'm going to hate you more. But it'll never work. Martin Luther King understood that. He said only love can drive out hate. That's exactly right. And so people have been blinded from that reality, from seeing the beauty of who Christ is, his love for them, his desire to chase after them and to catch them and to embrace them. And they keep rejecting it, thinking they have a better idea. Well, let's go on. In verse 5, it says this, for what we proclaim is not ourselves. You see this whole gospel, the light of Christ, the glory of Christ. We don't proclaim ourselves, but we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord, as Messiah, as the one, with ourselves as simply your servants, for Jesus' sake, that we need to be servants. This word servant is doulos. It's a word describing a person who was a slave in New Testament times. They had no rights of their own. They only had the rights of the ones who owned them. You see, we are the servants not only of the Lord, but we need to be servants of other people. We give up our rights for their good. That we ourselves as servants for Jesus' sake. Now look at this in verse 6. For God, who said this, let light shine out of darkness. He's quoting Genesis chapter 1 here, verses 3 and 4. And so when God made the world, it says that for God created the entire world, and the first thing he did is he created light. And that this light would be separated from the darkness. It would shine out of the darkness, that there was a uniqueness of a need in this world that had no form and no light, that he brought light into it. And it would shine out of the darkness. Now look at this. It says, that light has shone in our hearts. See, that light impacts, infects, and transforms the human heart. In order to do this, to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God, to illuminate the understanding, the in-depth understanding and embracing of the glory of God that has been revealed in the face of Jesus Christ. You want to know how beautiful God is? You look at how beautiful Jesus Christ is. And that his incredible love and grace for people. Maybe this is kind of a summary thought here. We need to recognize that the enemy, the one who blinds people from understanding, he is a deceiver, a liar, and a murderer, whose aim is to blind people from appreciating and embracing the beauty and the majesty of God and his worthy plan for our lives. I'm not sure we always believe that, do we? That God is so incredible, that his splendor and his beauty, his majesty is for us too. And that his plan for our lives is better and more worthy than the one we have for ourselves. And the enemy is trying to blind us to that. And it's trying to blind the whole world to that. So let's go on and look at the last part of this passage in verse 7. It says, but we have this treasure, the treasure of the glory, the gospel of light, the gospel of the glory of God, the gospel of the glory of God being revealed in the face of Christ, of who he is. We have this treasure in jars of clay. I don't know about you, but if I were to take this incredible treasure, I'm not sure I'd put it in a jar of clay. I think I'd put it in a bronze jar, or maybe a copper jar, something that's not going to break or kind of waste away. In the Middle East, there are a lot of archaeological digs that go on, have for hundreds and hundreds of years. One of the most common things they ever find is pottery. It's what they used primarily. It was just jars of clay. And very seldom do you ever find one of these jars that's not broken, or at least cracked. Usually broken into a million pieces. And they find these and try to piece them back together. But here it says that we have this treasure in jars of clay. Why would he take this treasure of the gospel and put it in us who are just jars of clay? Fragile, breakable, inadequate to really carry the weight of it all. Well, here's what it says. To show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. You see, it's not the container, like this picture of this cracked pot. It's not the container that's so valuable. It's the contents of the container that are so valuable. And this is the treasure of the gospel of light, of God's incredible love revealed through Christ. That is the incredible beauty. And we're just cracked pots. And so it brings us to kind of our experience in life. Look at this in verses 8 and 9. It says that we, in the life that we live here, we are afflicted in every way, but not crushed. Let's just think about that. We are afflicted in every way. The Greek word here means squeezed. Life has a way of squeezing us. And we've felt that in the last year, haven't we? We have felt that before. That's kind of part of the nature of life, is to feel that squeeze. Someday it's not going to be like that, but life on this earth, the life that we live now, we're squeezed. And look at this, it says squeezed in every way. You can just feel that. But here's what Paul says, but we're not crushed. Highlight that, we're not crushed. We're squeezed for sure, but we're not crushed. Look at this next one. We're perplexed. The Greek word really it maybe means that we can grab onto is to be confused. There are times when we say, I don't know and I don't understand. I don't get it. I'm confused. I don't have all the answers. We can be confused. And I think there are times where we are. It's times I am. We can be confused about things and not totally understand it. But we're not driven to despair. It can mean we're confused on which way to go, but we're not lost. We may not understand everything, but he has not abandoned us. We're not lost in this process. So we admit, hey, we're squeezed, but we're not crushed. We're confused? Yes, of course, at times, but we're not lost. And then this word, the word persecuted. The Greek word there kind of means we're tracked down. Is this someone were tracking us, pursuing us, to persecute us? And it says that we're tracked down, but we're not forsaken. Maybe better understood this way, but we're not abandoned. We may be tracked down, but our God has not abandoned us. And then the last one is this, struck down. Maybe better understood from the Greek word is to be knocked down. We can be struck down. We can be knocked down. It's like a boxer who gets into the ring and he's knocked down time and time and time again. You know, there was one boxer way back in the early 1900s that in a bout he was knocked down 42 times, but he was not destroyed. In fact, the word here might mean, but he was not knocked out. We've been knocked down plenty of times. We will again in the future, but we're not knocked down. And I think this being squeezed but not crushed, confused but not lost, tracked down but not abandoned, knocked down but not knocked out, is kind of wrapped up in this last verse 10. Always carrying in the body the death of Jesus. Wow, that's an incredible thought, isn't it? That we always carry in our body the suffering of Christ. You see, he has called us into his suffering, to shoulder the burden of the brokenness of this world. Now, we have our own brokenness, but we're impacted by the brokenness of others also. And so that we, as difficult as it may be, we carry in our body the suffering of Christ. And it is a privilege, because look at this. So that, circle it, so that we do that so that the life of Jesus may also be manifest in our bodies. That somehow the suffering of Christ, we learn and grow in the midst of that, and that we can live out the reality of the life of Christ as it's manifested, shown, revealed in the way we do life in our bodies. I think the big idea is this. Being resilient in the midst of the difficulties and sufferings of life actually allows us to radiate the reality of Christ. That's Jesus living his life in us and through us. You see, there's something about challenge and being squeezed and being perplexed and being knocked down that develops character in people, so that we can radiate the reality of a beautiful Christ by the way we deal with life. That is an incredible thing. And I think it's something we need for our day. So what do we do with this? What's the therefore? What now? What do we do? I think three things. I think we need to do this. We need to resolve, we need to recognize, and we need to recommit. Okay? First of all, resolve. Let's resolve ourselves to living life and doing ministry with integrity. Let's do away with whatever we do that's not honest and upfront. The devious, cunning, slandering things that we do in life. Let's do away with it. Let's commit ourselves to doing life and ministry, relationships with integrity. Upfront, honest, straightforward. If we make a mistake, let's own it. Let's put it out there. Let's resolve to do life and ministry with integrity. Take care of whatever you need to do. Maybe there's things you need to do today. Maybe there are people you need to go talk to today to make it right. We need to resolve ourselves to living life with integrity. Secondly, we need to recognize that the real enemy is not people. They're not the enemy. The real enemy is a deceiver, a liar, a murderer, who is blinding people from appreciating and embracing the beauty and the majesty of God himself and the worthy plan for people's lives. He's the enemy, not people. So let's recognize that. Let's strike out against him, not against others, because they've simply been deceived and blinded them from understanding. It's been veiled over their face. They can't see it. Let's make sure we keep the enemy the enemy. The enemy is not one another. The enemy is Satan himself. Okay, let's recognize that. And the third thing I think we need to do is this, is to recommit to having endurance, to having resilience in the midst of the difficulties of the suffering of life, so that we can express the reality of Christ in us. It's Jesus living his life through us. Let's recommit to enduring, being resilient in the midst of all that life has to offer. Now, there are beautiful times, but there are lots of hard times too. But the way we deal with it is far more important than trying to do away with the problems. Deal with it well. Resolve, recognize, recommit. Now, you guys, I told you, here was the big idea. We started with it. We'll end with it too. You and I are just cracked pots whom God is pleased to miraculously use by the filling of his Spirit in revealing to the world the majesty of his glory in the person of Christ. God wants to use us, not because we're cool, but because he's awesome. And he wants to use us to reveal himself in the beauty of who he is in the person of Christ. So our theme this Christmas has been, the light is here. And what we proclaim and what we announce to the world is that light, his name is Jesus. Jesus is the light of the world. And it is the greatest news we could ever share. So you guys, we're going to sing here and worship him together. So God bless you. And that all of us as cracked pots might allow the glory of God to be revealed through us because of who the incredible Jesus is.
Love incarnate, love divine, star and angels gave the sign. Bow to babe on bended knee, the Savior of humanity. Unto us a child is born,